Growing up, I was one of 4 sisters and 1 brother, and my mum completely filled that house with love. And you know, we would go to church, and we would. It was a really unconditional, loving household. That said, it was also a really quite stressful household with so many of us. And on paper, it was all of those things that would kind of deem you vulnerable. So my mum and dad were separated, I was free school meals, pupil premium. And so from a young age, I had this resilient spirit, and I don't know why, but something kind of just made me feel like that's not going to go against me. And so I decided that I wanted to go to university. And no one in my family had ever gone to university before. I just knew that I wanted to be as educated as I possibly could be. And also a massive influence for me was my nan. And she's passed now, but she came over from Ireland with nothing. She taught herself to read and write. She, honestly, Ronnie, you know, it's that I can't even, just one of the kindest people you will ever, she's someone you'd never forget. So with my nan being one of my biggest influences, I made this promise that I would go to university. And when I was at university, her dementia worsened, and she really sadly had a house fire. And it was only my 2nd or 3rd ever lecture. My sister was calling me constantly, and I remember having to leave, running down the lecture theatre, and just knowing that something wasn't right. And I pulled up to my nan's house, not too far from here, and she was just, her face was just completely covered in smoke, and she was unconscious, being pulled out on a stretcher. And that really, it was really traumatic to see someone that you love so much in that situation. Her house was fully on fire, and she was then at that point sectioned. And for the next 4 or 5 years, she was in St James's Hospital, and we were damned if she was going to be there on her own. And we would spend our birthdays, every Christmas day. It was tough, but it was tougher knowing that she was there on her own. And so my journey for mental health, through my own experience of witnessing it, it just opened my mind to people suffering. And whilst at the time I don't think I realised how much I was suffering myself, because I was just in the moment trying to get through it, it definitely played a massive part in almost like a grief. You know, dementia is something where in glimmers you see that person's eye and they light up and they're there again, but actually they're almost dead, even though they're still walking. It's hard to, you know, that vacancy, it's hard to almost articulate. And there was almost this journey of grieving before she even passed away, like watching her, losing her. And during university, I was visiting her a lot. And you know what, I'm a natural hard worker, but I'm not the most super intelligent in the world. You know, I'm someone who will work their butt off, you know, all night, work hard, go into an exam and be 1 mark off an A star, you know, whereas we all know those people who don't revise, they'll smash straight A stars. I'm not one of those people. I have to work at anything I do in life. But one of the things that it did mean is that I wasn't getting the grades that I needed at university, and it turned out a couple of months before graduation that I was 0.5 away from overall getting a 2-1. And I was given the opportunity to either resit a couple of my assignments or to just graduate with a 2-2. So I decided to graduate and with it, and it was incredibly difficult because my one wish and ambition I've always known from a young age is that I wanted to be a teacher. But to get on a postgrad for education, you need to have a minimum of a 2-1, or you did. And one of the key things that I applied to lots of universities, and they just wouldn't even touch me because of this 2-2. And so one day I decided, with fire in my belly from my nan, I decided actually I'm gonna make it happen. And I called up a local university, not our city university, but another local one, and I refused to get off the phone to the top chancellor at the university. And I was on the phone for well over an hour, and the receptionist was not happy, and I just thought, I'm not giving up. I want to talk to him. I want to explain to him, you know, how I've got here, and I'm not giving up now. And I got through to him, and he was almost quite humorous with his response and said, you know, I'm quite looking forward to hearing from this girl. And his words were with so much gusto to hang on the phone for this long and refuse to put down the phone. And I just explained to him, I said, look, you know, this is my story. This is where I know that I can empower the next generation. I know that I'm passionate about my subject, and I know the type of teacher that young people will connect to. And he was really open and honest with me and told me that I would not get my foot in the door because of my results, despite the fact that I was so passionate. It just wouldn't happen. But he did reveal to me at the end of the call that he himself obtained a 2-2. And it was almost like this, so don't stop trying. And I took it as that, whether it was intended or not, and I didn't. And he did allow me to go to interview, and it didn't go any further. And I was met by a lady who, she smirked when I told her that I hadn't got the grades. And she basically told me that I just didn't fit the profile for someone working in education. And it really lit the fire in my belly, because at that point, Ronnie, I thought, you are exactly who I'm not going to be like. You know, she was an ex-teacher. You are exactly the type of person that I'm not going to be when I'm a teacher, because I will be, you know. So a really dear friend of mine who had got into uni and was doing her teacher training, her mum lectured at the university. And I remember going around there one night for tea and crying and just saying to her, you know, I really, like, why? I know that I can do it. And so she introduced me to who is a very close friend of mine now, the lady who runs the English PGCE. And I told her my story, and she listened. She really listened. And she gave me an opportunity, and she said, I'm going to give you a chance. And a week into starting that PGCE, my nan really had a decline. She was put on palliative care. And so the teaching, it's relentless. You're warned at the start, you know, you don't miss anything. You don't turn up late, So I was going to these lectures at Portsmouth University, and I would drive straight to the home, and I would stay at the home, and we'd do shifts through the night with my laptop, and then I would go back to university. And I held my nan's hand when she passed away, and at midnight, and then I was back in uni at 9 a.m. the next day. I was not giving up on this, and actually going through that journey made me even stronger. And for a long time, I was kind of just riding on the adrenaline of that, because I wasn't totally present. I just knew I needed to get to the end of this course. And I did. I graduated, and whilst my nan was not there to watch me, I genuinely feel, I can always feel it in my heart now, I genuinely feel when I walked across that stage in my gown, she was there with me, like, she, you know, go on, girl. I could feel her presence, just totally, you know, you did it. And yeah, I was then promoted in my NQT +1 to be head of year. I was the youngest person in the UK at that time to complete my national professional qualification in senior leadership. My focus was on emotional intelligence, and I did that at the Institute of Education, University of London. So two years into teaching, in a city school, all boys school, I gave my life to it, and soul, and everything else. And in the meantime, in my personal life, I was really struggling with starting a family, fertility-wise, pregnancy-wise, it just was not happening. And my husband and I at the time were, it was just really, really difficult. And I remember seeing a consultant and him saying to me, if you stay in this job, then you are not going to have a family. And, you know, I'm talking, I very rarely went to the staff room. You know, I would run extracurricular, and I would at lunchtime sit with the children, and, you know, I breathed that job, and I loved it. But I didn't know work-life balance. I didn't know how much was too much. And so I left that job, and a couple of weeks later fell pregnant. And I started a new role, pregnant, and fortunately have the most amazing boss who is just a really strong woman. She listens, she is innovative, she's inspirational, and she just supports the whole you know. And I had a liver disease in my pregnancy. A very rare liver disease, and one of the key things that with this liver disease, it's to do with your bile acids, is that there's a high risk of stillbirth. So I was finally pregnant with this baby, and every 4 days going into hospital to essentially check that he or she was still alive. And the stress that put on me was just beyond. And he was born early but healthy. He was tongue-tie, and I had mastitis, and I had, you know, it was a real challenge, too much to even go into. And at that point, I feel like an amalgamation of everything I got through, my anxiety postnatally just rocketed. And coupled with the fact that this liver disease, for some reason, creates abnormal cells. It was just before my son's first Christmas that I was put on the cancer pathway and had to have surgery on my face. Fortunately, everything was okay. Scars, scabs, stitches, you can live with that, you know, but there was no let up. There was no kind of, right now I'm just gonna enjoy, now I'm just gonna, so I returned to work, and after my maternity of my son. And in education, as we know, there is such a significant rise in mental health issues with young people. And as much as I love English, it was just really wearing me down. And so I decided to set up a Mindful Monday class, and it would just be teaching breathing exercises, talking about anxiety, opening up about mental health. And it was really, really well attended. We'd sit out on the field, you know, we'd do breathing exercises together, but this was only from what I'd done personally. You know, I was not trained in any way at all. And so I, at that point, decided that I needed to do more, and then felt pregnant again. So my precious place is actually just my local neighbourhood, and it's not far from where my nan lived, which is even more special. But also I just love being by the water, and I feel that for me, on a kind of extended metaphor level, this beautiful stream. Not only have I taken my children there and we play there, but it almost reminds me of the flow of life, and that when we start out young, our mental health journey, it can be like a trickle, it can be like a stream, and then it can meander into a river. And then, in adulthood, in the trauma, in the good, in the bad, and the ugly, we're the ocean. And our journey is long, and it's not going to end until it ends. Yeah, it's just a very special place for me. Second pregnancy, over the moon. In your body, you know when something's not right? And so one morning I remember waking up and knowing, I had a bump, I was visually pregnant, my wardrobe was full of maternity clothes, and I just knew that something wasn't right. And so my husband and I went to the hospital, and I remember there having a scan, and there was a heartbeat and everything was great, but something didn't feel right. A couple of days later, just waking up feeling in pain, and I remember the consultant there was no heartbeat. And actually our baby had passed away 6 or 7 days prior to that, from not long after the first scan that said everything was okay. It wasn't. So I have a condition, and my body is beautifully complicated, and as well as this liver disease, I also have a condition where I suffer with very low platelets. And after my son, I had to have blood transfusions and so on. But with this particular pregnancy, I was told to go home, and I was going to get booked in for what they call a surgical management, is what the term they call it. So I went home. I was booked in for a couple of days away. I went home trying to kind of process that I was no longer pregnant, or at least at that point carrying a baby that was alive. My body had other plans, and I began to bleed. And I remember my husband hanging home as long as he could, but he had to go to work. And there's no, in New Zealand actually, this has changed now, but when you miscarry in the UK, there is no, you can take time off and something, stuff like that. He'd left. And I just remember the most intense pain, and I was at home alone with my son, who had just turned 1, and I don't even know how, but I remember just having my phone nearby, not having a lot of battery, calling my mum at work, like she works in reception, and just saying, I think my battery went. And she knew instantly. She arrived here, and I'd passed out, I was hemorrhaging, Ronnie was sat next to me, covered in blood, and an ambulance was called. They took me down the stairs. I was taken into hospital. I vividly remember him holding my hand and saying to me, "Right, the worst is over now, love, you're in safe hands." And in that moment, you believe it, because why wouldn't you, right? And so, but that on that particular day wasn't the case. I, at that point, have learned I should have been taken straight to theatre, but the registrar, who was a locum, so she wasn't employed permanently, she decided that she would get the baby out herself physically. There was no pain relief. I was given paracetamol when the ambulance arrived, and so I'd had paracetamol, and that was it. And my mum and my husband arrived, and I remember my mum saying, "This is barbaric, like, where is the gas and air?" Like, the bare minimum needs gas and air. And, my platelets are low, so I'm hemorrhaging. The baby, or part of what they call the pregnancy tissue, got stuck in the neck of my womb. And so I can't even describe the pain. And I just remember kind of passing in and out of consciousness. And it was horrific. And it wasn't even until probably weeks after that I began to process that actually I've lost a baby. Because what happened was, a consultant came in, she realised what was going on, she was amazing and whisked me away. I was then taken to theatre straight away, and what should have been done in the first instance was done. But you know, what that left me with was a inability to grieve over the process, because I was traumatized by the after event. And so, yeah, I was just completely numb. And in terms of my mental health journey, that was the lowest I've ever been. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, and I would wake up in the night and I could smell blood and I could feel like I had blood on me. I would visualize this lady standing over me, and it was dark. It was the brain is beautiful, but it's complex. And I was experiencing things of films, and you almost think, this can't happen to me. This shouldn't be happening to me. And I remember being in school and, working within a department full of women. There were a number of women who were pregnant, and a few of them were very similar stage to me. And I remember just feeling so empty, and, watching their beautiful bumps grow. And I just knew that I needed help. And I remember going to see my doctor and saying, I need help. I feel I'm traumatized, but I'm at a place of strength where I'm ready to do something about it. And there was a few weeks where I wasn't, and I was a mess. So my doctor, who is just amazing, put me in touch with a therapist, and I had some therapy called EMDR, and it's particular for post-traumatic stress. And I remember meeting him and him saying to me, in post-traumatic stress, you can sometimes get something after, quite often, called post-traumatic growth. And I remember just sort of thinking, how on earth is something going to grow from this? The irony of it, right? How is something going to be born from this? And actually, he was so right, because it enabled me to focus on everything on my mental health journey, from what I hadn't even realised I needed work on. Therapy is so powerful. Talking to someone who has the tools to kind of get you through is just so powerful. And yeah, I suddenly for the first time felt myself. I wasn't self-conscious. I wasn't worried about using my voice because people might see me as uneducated, or I don't have the poshest voice in the world, or the underdog. Or I suddenly just thought, you know what? I've been put in this position physically, emotionally, mentally. If you can't live now in your most unapologetically authentic way, when the hell can you? I decided that I was going to take a risk, and I approached my head teacher and said, look, these Mindful Mondays, the feedback was incredible from the pupils, from the parents. And so I decided that I wanted to use my experience to learn more. As a teacher, we're talking about learners, but as a human being, one of my biggest things is to never stop learning. I'd done a lot of research, and I found this amazing course called Teen Yoga, and it was really well founded. And what I liked about it was that the language was a lot of neuroscience. There was a lot of research, and so it was about actually learning about how trauma and how mental health, how it affects our body. And I shared that quotation with you about stained glass windows. People are like stained glass windows. They shimmer and they shine when the sun is gleaming, but it's when the light goes out that you truly notice the light from within, the beauty from within. And when I think back on my mental health journey, I shimmered and I shined when everything was going right, and I was at school and I was head girl, but actually, it was only when the darkness set in that I feel that I was my most authentic, and I feel that I was my most real. And I had a purpose, because my purpose was using that strength and using all of the experience to help others. Our journey is long, and it's not going to end until it ends. And so learning to be with the tides in any situation. And for me now, in the pandemic, only in September last year, I gave birth to my rainbow baby, my daughter. And for me, we talk about in any storm there's a rainbow after, and for me she is just the epitome of that, and both my children are. And I graduated as a teen yoga specialist, and at the end of the course one of the things that they ask you to do is your why are you doing this, you know, and this is something that I wanted to share. I found in my old book from when I first ever wrote it, and I'm just going to share it with you now. So here as I am right now, after everything that I've been through, my deepest wish is to cultivate a kind, compassionate, non-judgmental culture that allows teen essence to flourish. Authenticity, truth, empowerment and peace for all young people. And there is no way that I would have been able to write that and kind of just dream that up if I hadn't gone through what I had, because it's the struggles that really give you that longing for peace. And the advice of what I would give my teen self is I want to share a poem in true English teacher style, and it's by a wonderful lady called Donna Ashworth, and the poem is called To Our Daughters. And this is just encapsulates what I would say to myself, but also as a mother of a son and a daughter. I want them to look back and watch this, and I want them to know that I don't care what they do in life, but I want them to be kind, and I want them to be able to listen back to these words and to all young people and just know that they are enough. So my advice: you were born made of softness, sweetness and love, but with a will so strong it could bend iron, despite what society may tell you. You don't have to lose one or the other. Your superpower in this life is that little voice inside of you that tells you when something isn't right. Listen to it. Your self-worth is controlled by you, only you. Never put it in someone else's hands. You are equal to, not better than, anyone else you may ever come across in this life. Never lose your joy. No matter how serious your ambition or how driven your path is, remember, we are only here for a short time and life is to be lived. Comparison will not propel you ahead. Rather, it will keep you back from the real treasures in this world. Stop comparing. Better still, never start. Fear is an instinct, but unlike your inner voice, it can be misleading. Never let fear hold you back from the wonders you could see. Do not let society or anyone tell you what beauty looks like. If you feel beautiful, you are. If you see beauty, it's there. Your beauty is an amalgamation of everything that makes you, you. And it's utterly unique. Embrace that early. You don't have to choose between being a warrior, a princess, a lady, or a woman. You can be all of them, and most of them you are every day. Lastly, it's okay to not be okay, and it's even better when you talk about it. Darkness cannot shine through the light, but the light can shine through the darkness. You can be amazing and admired whilst admitting your weaknesses and discussing your fears and anxieties, even more so in fact. And never let anyone dull your sparkle. You were born to shine.